Welcome to the Project DIY Hunter Podcast. If you're thinking about hunting DIY, or if you've been hunting DIY for a long time, this podcast is for you. We invite you to join us as we seek to gain knowledge to continue to be successful DIY hunters. Thanks for listening and enjoy the podcast. What is up? Thanks for getting back for another episode of Project DIY Hunter Podcast. I'm joined with Kenny and his buddy Drew. We're outside hanging out. This is the first time we've done it outside. It's the first time we've done it face-to-face with more than, two people. So it's pretty awesome. So, Kenny, how are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm just enjoying the weather.
Yeah, man, it's pretty nice out here. I expected it to be pretty warm when I pulled up and seen y'all chilling outside, but weather's pretty good out here.
Yeah, I was hoping the mosquitoes wouldn't eat us up, but, So, tell us about yourself, Drew. What got you into fishing, and how did you get to where you're at now?
Well, obviously I've been fishing my whole life, from with my grandpa, my dad, all that good stuff, fishing out of ponds, little creeks, stuff like that. Then as I grew up, just started to take it more serious, build a passion, if you will, because, Lord knows that's what I have now is a passion for it. Really, I've always loved fishing, and, from the bank, from a bass boat, a pontoon, a raft, whatever gets me out there.
So how did you end up in a kayak? Because me, myself, as the heavier guy, I don't want to paddle. So how'd you go from a boat to a kayak and want to be that guy?
Well, in 2015 was the first time I had ever kayak fished. One of my buddies, Derek, asked me to go out. I thought we were just going to float down a river. We get there, and, he's got 8 rods, a bunch of tackle, the whole works. And it was funny because his only backup kayak, if you will, the loaner kayak that I was fortunate enough to use was an inflatable kayak. But it had rod holders. It had, it wasn't just some, little Walmart gimmick inflatable deal. It had some bells and whistles. We went out, man, and honestly, the first fish I missed because I was too worried about paddling, trying to, reposition the boat. The second fish, it was only a pound and a half, but it took me for a miniature sleigh rod. And after that, I just, started looking up kayaks and really, seeing what was out there. And it's kind of where I'm at now.
So how did the inflatable paddle? Because to me, it'd have more draft on it per se.
It really didn't paddle. it was, you can imagine being on some type of inner tube with a double-ended paddle and a fishing rod, and that's about what you could expect in an inflatable kayak.
So you're going to work twice as hard to get the same result.
Yeah, you're going to work 3 times as hard to know that you're just spinning in circles.
Yeah, no, I can totally see that.
But, yeah, so my first, the first real kayak, and I say real as in, more than just inflatable, my first real fishing kayak experience was in 2017. I had played around with, I had a little $120 sit-inside kayak that I went to a place called Boyd's Mill Pond, and, I slaughtered that water in that sit-inside. I was out there every day after work, every weekend, and, really got to, got my own experience with it. And, because no matter if you hunt, fish, whatever, you have good days, you have bad days. And I don't know, man. And then plus growing up, not in the richest family. So a kayak's way more affordable.
At that time.
Yeah, at that time. And then I don't know, man. It's like one of those things that you do it long enough, you don't like any other way.
I can almost see the solitude and simplicity in the beginning. You know, you're not worried about going to buy gas, and you're not worried about registering and everything at that time. And, you know, you kind of just throw it on top of your car or on a little trailer and go. You don't really have to have a big storage place to keep it.
Don't worry about it cranking when it gets to the ramp.
And that's true. I mean, it's, I don't know, just the simplicity of it's appealing, I'm sure, to some. But then you kind of took it to another level.
Well, yeah, because in 2008, well, the end of 2017, I caught the last tournament of the local tournament trail. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea how that tournament system was set up. And it's completely different than your typical bass boat tournaments. Bass boat tournament, obviously, you have a live well. You keep, get your keepers, you cull, get your biggest fish, whatever, take them in. You do a total weight on a scale. Well, obviously, in a kayak, you don't have enough room to have a live well to maintain, the health of 5, however, whatever size bass that you have. Keep them alive for 8 hours, be able to take them in. It's just, I'm not going to say it's not possible, but it's not like feasible, you know what I mean? So it's off of measuring devices, and it's a CPR method, catch, photo, release. And I went in with, honestly, I went and got one of the little stick rulers that you use on a bass boat at Walmart for like $8. That's not, it's not any ruler works. I mean, there's, restrictions and guidelines and, approved measuring devices that you have to be able to compete in that level. So I kind of I wouldn't even say I got my feet wet in 2017 because it was one tournament. 2018, and this is how I guess destiny works, or whatever, if you want to call it faith or whatever. As fate would have it, in January 2018, I was actually looking for a job. And I came across a brand new company called Bonafide Kayaks in Greenville, 15 minutes from where I lived. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to get in there. I put in my app, and on the way home, got a call to come back. So I was like, I'm only 15 minutes away. I'm going to turn around and go back. And I actually got to talk to the CEO, president, owner, founder, the whole shebang, Luther Cyphers. Well, side story, Luther Cyphers also owned and founded Yak Attack. Yak Attack is like fishing accessories, rod holders, tackle management, paddle holder. I mean, anything you can think of, they have something for it.
Plethora of accessories.
Yeah, and while going back to the story, I went to Bonafide. They made kayaks, and whenever in the interview, he told me, hey man, this is a startup company. We're not we don't have one single kayak in a store yet, but I can promise you hours. I can promise you, competitive pay, and you get to make kayaks, and you're gonna get to meet whoever walks through that door. I was like,
yeah, no, that's right up your alley.
You had me at get to make kayaks and competitive pay. So I actually started that night. I only worked for like 3 or 4 hours. Doing a little bit of training, kind of walking through wherever, checking out the inventory. Well, fast forward, I was there for 2 years. Ended up being the customer service rep. Went on the road for them, did a bunch of trade shows, demo days, stuff like that. Got to meet a lot of different people, see so many different bodies of water that I probably wouldn't have seen had I not had that position. And what's awesome, another side story to that is what's awesome, the kayak that I have now I actually made from a plastic powder resin. I made the boat, trimmed it out, put all the accessories on it, put whatever I wanted wherever on the boat, whatever colored seat, colored pad,
Yeah, no,
I
it's
had
wicked.
free reign on it. And but yeah, now so if you look at that right there I guess as a picture, you see, 3 years ago I was in a $120 kayak. Now I have a $1,800 kayak. And that's just if you were to purchase it bare bones, And I probably have, man, close to $2,000 worth of stuff on it. I mean, my fish finder alone's $1,200. So
what all do you run? I guess you don't need all this stuff, of course, to just go fishing in a kayak. But what do you use for your tournaments and I guess your go-to kayak system? I don't mean lures and stuff, but I just mean how many rod holders, how many rods, your graph. Like what's your home?
Well, see, that's the thing with kayak fishing is you're limited to space. Like your space is severely limited. And not only space, you have to take in, weight into accountability. Because obviously you have a weight capacity, but if you're, they have pedal drive kayaks, paddle type kayaks, and then of course now you're getting into motorized kayaks. And I mean, really, you have to take in weight for anything. I don't care what type of kayak you have, because I mean, you don't want to be out there for 8 hours during a tournament in a barge and not be able to really get anywhere, because then you limit yourself on, probability and doing well in the tournament if you're limited to, X amount of space because you can't paddle a half a mile,
So in the tournament world, do you think there's an advantage to the guy that can afford the trolling motor?
Absolutely.
So it's like almost a little bit unfair.
Well, okay, I'm kind of. This answer is going to be slightly like a contradiction, if you will, because yes, they have the better advantage, but not always. Just because, for instance, there's a professional kayak angler by the name of Drew Gregory. He uses a kayak, he has multiple kayaks. But for instance, this last season, 2020 season, I know he made $10,000 easily, cashing checks and the Hobie BOS and then KBF from a kayak number one that cost less than $1,000. He paddled, took I think like 4 or 5 rods with him and 2 tackle boxes. But he knew where the fish were.
Yeah.
But if you look at where he went, though, you're not getting a pedal kayak back there. You're not getting a kayak with a motor back there. Like, he literally had to drag his kayak probably half of the duration of his trip just to get to the spots he was trying to access. He's a tributary guy, a small creek, loves the backwaters, tries to find, some river inlet coming in. I mean, the dude's a genius. I mean, his tournament winning says that for him, and he's a really good dude. But saying that story just goes to show that, like, you don't need spot lock. You don't need, $1,000, $2,000, fish finder setup. You don't need Panoptics. You don't need all of that stuff. But I mean, it helps. That's just like, there's guys that Santee Cooper last year, it was 1 in 30 feet of water. And if you know anything about Santee Cooper, that's not really what you would think going to Santee Cooper. You're looking in 10 feet or less.
Yeah, I mean, 30 feet of water might be at the dam.
Yeah. Well, it was on the Southern Lake, Moultrie or whatever it's called.
Yeah, Lake Moultrie.
But I mean, it just goes to show you. I mean, that's just like if you were to, try to predict a hunting trip of a place that you've never been, you might think they're, in cornfields or whatever, but really they're up on, the ridges of a mountain taking cover. Or, you know what I mean? Like, you don't know until you do your research. So, like, for me, I prefer a motor. just because I can cover more water, I can hit more spots in a day, and I'm not killing myself doing it. A lot of the times, you know, like I consider myself a power fisherman. I don't really. I'm not saying I don't, but, you know, I'm not the guy that goes out there first thing in the morning and picks up, you know, a spinning rod with a little finesse worm on it. I'm picking up a crankbait that's 18 to 22 feet that you're going to feel it in 20 minutes of throwing it. Yeah. Like you're cranking your tail off. But you cover a lot of water way quicker that way. And that's just, I like to find the fish and then slow down. So really, I mean, and that's what I love about kayak fishing is like, you know, if you look at the bass boat guys, like everybody either has a Phoenix or a Ranger or a, you know what I mean? And everybody has, you know, two 12-inch graphs at the console and two 16 inches up front. Or everybody has a spotlight trolling motor. Everybody has a power pole. Everybody has a, you know what I mean? It gets to that cookie cutter effect that like you can only do so much and still be doing what 10 other people have already done. Yeah. But with a kayak, I mean, with your bigger tournament trails, you have, you know, certain restrictions and stuff like with KBF, for instance, you can have a gasoline outboard, but it can't exceed 3 horsepower. You can have an electric motor, but the wattage there's some type of equation to get like your wattage converted to horsepower. The biggest motor out there is the Torqeedo 1103. That's the most, I guess, potent one, if that's the word, you know, you want to use, and it's equivalent to a 3 horsepower. But like I said, you have these guys that would prefer a simple pedal drive or a smaller paddle type kayak. Now, they're not going to be, you know, power fishing in 30, 40, 50 foot of water. They're going to be in the creeks, looking for what I call residential bass, which I feel, I mean, that's, from my fishing experience in life, residential bass are a thing. Like you can go to the same dock, you know, year after year.
You're going to catch the same fish.
Catch that same fish because it stays in that area. But, no, as far as like my kayak setup, my preference, it's always changing, number one. But on average, I take 10 rods with me, 8 to 10 rods, depending on, you know, what I'm doing. Obviously, if pre-fishing and practice went better than that, I try to minimize, you know, the amount of weight and clutter that I have with me. Like if I'm on a strong, you know, jig bite or, you know, I know, hey, first 3 hours of the morning, top water. After that, you know, some type of reaction bait, whether it be a crankbait or a chatterbait or something like that. And then, you know, when it gets hot, pick up the worm and slow down. In a situation like that, I'm probably taking 3 or 4 rods. And, you know, maybe a terminal box and a bag of plastics and, you know, simple.
Don't forget your crackers.
Yeah, you got to have some you got to have some snacks and crackers, and I'm more of a Uncrustable guy, but
no, Uncrustables got to be frozen, and by the time you eat them, they ain't going to be frozen out there. So
yeah, well, again, it's all about preference. I like it when it's still almost frozen. But
the bread's not. Yeah, but the jelly's not and the bread's not, but the peanut butter is kind of.
Yeah, still a little stiff. Yeah, perfect.
No, that is a good time. I love how we always resort back to food.
Right, especially if you're on a diet.
I know I'm the one that's on the diet, and it's absolutely killing me. But the diet's to get ready for Colorado, so y'all get ready for that one.
Yeah.
But so why? I guess how does kayak tournaments differ from regular tournaments, except the the app where you send the fish in, take a picture, you can release it and all that. So what other rules are different? I mean, do you still leave it starlight? Is it still 8-hour tournaments? Is it? I mean, how do you do big fish in that situation? Is it still just picture? How many people try to cheat? Like, can you actually cheat doing it? Because I know on these bigger fishing tournaments, they'll go put them in a dock and trash can. You know, I didn't know Y'all see a lot of that?
So first I want to cover the cheating aspect. There's obviously over the years a lot of things have been discovered the hard way, the wrong way. I mean, there's been some crazy attempts at cheating in kayak fishing. Just because you have the catch, photo, release method, you have to use, the approved measuring device. I mean, there's been people that have measured dead fish. I mean, you can tell if a fish is dead. Its eyes glossing over. It's the number one thing that happens. If you have a gray eye, now there are stipulations where, I mean, I've caught a fish before where it had a dead eye. Like the fish was live and well, but one eye was completely glossed over. And in that instance, you can still weigh that fish, but there's like 3 different things that you have to do for that fish to be accepted and counted for your total weight, if you will, or total length for the day. And I mean, you'd have to take a video of it showing the dead eye, showing you releasing it and it swimming off healthy, that, it was a decent fish, or a live fish. You have to immediately contact whatever tournament director just to let them know, hey, I have a fish that's probably going to be challenged. And that's another thing in kayak fishing is you can actually challenge, just like with, racing. A lot of people, I think he has an illegal motor or whatever. You can challenge that person. Same thing with kayak fishing. You can challenge their fish. Hey, man, this wasn't legal. And so what makes it different or whatever is, and to prevent cheating is you have something called an identifier. And an identifier, it's a little card that has, whatever code is generated that morning of the tournament. And it's usually a code that, like, it's strictly off a chance.
Yeah, you're not going to make it up.
Yeah, nobody could guess that that's what the identifier was going to be. For instance, our local trails, the Palmetto State Kayak Bass Fishing Trail is something in the upstate. We go all the way down to Santee. But anyways, what we usually do in the morning, there's a board of 5 or a board of 5 members on the board, with a president. What they'll do is, like in the morning, for instance, the tournament director is Barry, and then, his right-hand man, a board member, Terry Smith. Barry will look at Terry and be like, hey, man, give me a letter. And he'll be like, R. And then, they'll look at me and be like, Drew, give us a number. And I'll be like, 7. And then, they'll get like 4 digits and be like, R7P9. And you have to write that on your identifier card, which has to be in each picture of each fish submitted. Not only that, the mouth has to be shut. If the mouth is open at all, that's a 1/4-inch penalty. If the fish's lip is not up against your bump board, that's a 1/4-inch penalty. If you touch the actual fin, the tail fin of the fish in your picture, that's a 1/2-inch penalty. And the reason being is because, you can squeeze out a 1/2 inch on a fish if you pinch their tail together.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people don't understand the difficulty of just getting the fish to lay there, much less close their gills, keep their mouth shut, and lay their tail flat. That alone is a challenge. And I think that's why I like it. I'm not going to say as much as I do, but for lack of a better word, that's why I like it as much as I do. It's a challenge. It's always a challenge. And not only that, I can go where a bass boat can't. I went through I think it was like a 40 or 42-inch culvert before, underneath the road to a backwater pond that had no docks, There's no boat ramp. That's water that probably never gets hit. And that was actually on Kiwi. Me and my buddy Kyle Davis went out there. And I mean, you can ask him. I pulled out, I think, it was 6 pounds, 2 ounces, and he got like a 5.8. And we were back there for 30 minutes, 45 minutes.
So I guess y'all don't weigh them. You just go strictly off of inches.
Well, yeah, in a tournament, I mean, I keep a scale on my kayak just in case, I break my PB. I want to know what I'm working with. But the length is, tournament standards, you're going off of inches. And we go off it's all the way down to 1/4 inch increments. And you'd be surprised how many times that 1/4 inch counts at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I bet it will.
What kind of lengths are you looking at winning these tournaments, and what lengths?
I mean, really, that just varies. A lot of the times, it just varies if it's primarily a spotted bass fishery or if it's predominantly largemouth or smallmouth.
Right, Kiwi would be shorter than Hartwell, I would think.
Yes and no. I've got a couple of honey holes on Kiwi where I know the largemouth like. And see, but that's the thing though is, with spotted bass, 9 times out of 10, I don't care, if you go on a guided trip or whatever, 75% of your fish are going to be a pound or smaller if you're fishing for spotted bass. Just because, spotted bass don't, in South Carolina anyways, they don't, really get that big. My personal best spotted bass is 4 pounds, 2 ounces, and that was out of Joe Cassie in 63 feet of water. And the only reason I got that fish was because of electronics, and but I mean, really to answer your question, okay, so a 20-incher is a good fish, a really good fish. On a 5-fish limit, if you can get in the 90s, you're doing really good. But hand in hand with that, the first ever BASS, Bassmaster Classic Kayak Series was this year on Lake Fork. And Mark Pennegraph on day 1 put up like 103 inches. Then on day 2 put up like 114 inches. So, I mean, these are all 7, 8, 9 pounds, fish.
You're also talking about Lake Fork.
Yeah, which is the number one, they just put out the top 100 lakes for 2021, and Lake Fork is number 1. I mean, if you know anything about Lake Fork, that is a bass factory. Like, I mean, they're, I think the PB, or I'm so used to saying PB, the state record for Texas came out of Lake Fork, and I think it's like 16, 17 pounds.
Oh, my God.
And that's
a toad.
Yeah. I mean, my personal best is 9 pounds, 7 ounces. And as crazy as it is, came out of Lake Greenwood.
Really?
Yeah, I was 21, 22, somewhere around in there.
Well, my brother caught a 11 3/4 out of a farm pond on a frog in a Zebco 33. And he had to jump in the water to get it because the Zebco 33 drag wouldn't pull it in. It was turned all the way up. It's a funny story because my brother don't fish.
Right.
I mean, it was kind of one of them, let's go fishing.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, my PB is kind of the same thing. Now, granted, it wasn't a farm pond. It was actual lake, but I was bank fishing with I think it was like a 6-foot spinning rod, super like medium light, super light set up, maybe 8-pound line. And I really wasn't even supposed to be fishing that. I actually went to go cut somebody's grass, my landlord at the time, and they had a lake house property. I got done cutting the grass, had a rod in the trunk, and just went for it. A couple hours just walking up and down the bank, and made a cast up under a tree. I thought I was hung, so I, kept tension on the line just for a second, and I watched the line just start skating across the water. I'm like, yeah, I'm not hung. So I set the hook, and I had to jump down in the water too, and it ended up being it's crazy. I didn't have a scale on me. The only way that I know what it weighed is the neighbor to the landlord's house that I was at was sitting on a dock fishing, and he had a scale. And he saw the size of the fish that I pulled out. I was like, man, bring it over here. Let's throw it on the scale.
Tell you a funny story about measuring my brother's fish, right? Well, they were, like I said, they was at a farm pond. He's not a fisherman. He knew it was a big fish, so he went and threw it in the bed of his truck and brought it home. So, I don't know, 45 minutes to an hour later after it's been out of the water, he weighed it. So that thing was probably over 12
Yeah.
when he first pulled it out of the water.
That's it. It blows my mind, man. That I mean, even us, South Carolina, 16 pounds 2 ounces. That is the state record.
Where's that at?
It was set in. Everybody can check the numbers. I've looked at this so many times. I'm almost certain I'm right. It was in 1949 out of Lake Marion, which is the North Lake of Santee Cooper. But in 2001, it was tied out of a big. I can't remember if it was a farm pond, a private pond, or a pay pond. It was something like that. It was tied in cow pens, I believe. 16 pounds 2 ounces.
That's a freaking toad. Here's a fun fact. Charles used to fish for Clemson.
Did, yeah, that's what I was about to get into earlier when I asked you, the length, because whenever I was fishing, you knew that morning basically what you needed to, cut a check or make it to the national championship. I mean, you knew 16 pounds, Lake Norman, you're up there. You look at maybe a boat. But, yeah, that's why I was asking you what the length was. You said about 90 inches is kind of when you feel good.
Yeah, well, okay, so, for instance, Lake Hartwell, Kiwi, last year, the KBF trail, it was like a dual lake, showdown. You could pick either lake to fish, and it was a 2-day event. I led it for almost 7 hours. And I ended up 8th overall, and my buddy Kyle ended up 6th. Kyle had, I think it was 91 inches. I ended out like 80, it was high 80s, 86 or 87 inches. But the thing is with kayak fishing, a lot of people like to sandbag. Like you're pro, like you don't have to submit the fish the second you catch it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So it's like a live update, kind of like the Major League Fishing.
Exactly. You have
cool.
a live, scoreboard, leaderboard, if you will. So, and I'm not going to lie, when you're in one of those tournaments, the best advice I can give you is if you're doing well, do not look at your phone. Do not look at your phone. And I'm not just saying just with the leaderboard because, Hobie, BOS, KBF, and then BASS, all they have, like obviously the sponsored like Facebook pages or whatever. You can go to like, the Bassmaster page, or you can go, for instance, Project DIY. You can go to whatever page, and they do like post updates. So the whole time I'm fishing, Facebook's in my PFD, my life jacket, like just going off. And all I'm worrying about doing is, I get a fish in, make sure it's a good coal. Obviously if I don't have a limit by that time, make sure my pictures are right. And see, what I did want to add in as far as the difference between bass boats and kayak fishing is the catch photo release. You have to make sure you have a good picture before you let the fish go. And that's what a lot of people mess up on is, they'll have, 22, 23, 24 inch, toad, just straight up monster of a fish. But they forgot to put their identifier in the fish. Or in the picture with the fish. So
right, you just get so excited you caught that big fish, you forget to do the correct picture.
So that's really why, like, I tell anybody if they want to get into kayak fishing or not necessarily even just tournament fishing, but kayak fishing in general, it's all about you have to find your method. There's a method for anything. Even if you're just going out in a local farm pond in a kayak with one rod, landing that fish, you have to have a method because that paddle's got to go somewhere. Yeah. You got to watch out, for your line. Obviously you don't want the end of your line, rubbing over your paddle. If you've got a 4, 5, 6 pounder on, that's wanting to dog you, come up and jump and then go right back to the bottom, So there's methods for everything. And like with mine, I've actually used this method to help me get a bigger fish, like tournaments in the spawn. Bed fishing, obviously, anybody that knows anything about, spawning bass, typically the first fish you see on a bed is going to be the male. And your rule of thumb is the male's typically the smaller one of the couple with the female. The female's the big girl. What I use is something called fish grips, and more or less like locking pliers that go around the fish's lip. And I tie paracord, to the handle, one end of the paracord to the handle of the fish grip, and the other end of the paracord to like a carabiner that I latch to my kayak. And I more or less put the fish on a leash. That's one of my secrets, if you will, to get the fish to calm down, to lay down on your board so you can get your picture. Get the hook out, put it right back in the water, let it chill out, and just calm down. And once you pick it back up, it's like a completely different fish. Because a lot of people try to, get their measurement with a jig still in its mouth. Like, you're probably not going to get the best picture. It's not going to relax. It's still, it knows what's going on. Especially if it's a bigger fish. That bigger fish got bigger for a reason. Because it wasn't stupid. And... walk through more or less of my kayak. Obviously, I have to have a PFD or life jacket. I call it a PFD. You have to have a paddle, just in case, because I do have a trolling motor, but batteries die, wires come loose, motors burn up. You always have to be, prepared for the worst. So paddle, obviously a net, my measuring device, and every time I get my measuring device, I make sure I have an identifier, and I always have a backup identifier. You drop things in the water, it starts raining, whatever, you're not prepared, you always have to have a backup. Like I said, 8 to 10 rods. I have a Yak Attack Black Pack, which is more or less a milk crate on steroids, and it's where I keep all my tackle. It has 8 rod holders on it, and then I have 2 track-mounted rod holders by Yak Attack. I have the Omega Pro and the Zuka 2. You can find all of those at yakattack.us. Like I said before, amazing accessories. I have a Lowrance Elite FS9 9-inch fish finder, touchscreen, active target capable or compatible. I take, and to power my fish finder, I actually use deer feeder batteries. The 12-volt little 7-amp-hour. I take 3 of those with me. One of those actually runs my nav lights up front, my green and red. I have LED strips, wired into the kayak. And obviously once the light comes out, I turn my lights off and just use that battery as a backup for my graph. I use a Minn Kota C230 Endura, just your standard tiller, handle, 30-pound thrust trolling motor. let's see what else. That's pretty much it. And I take probably 4 3700 Plano boxes. One of them's dedicated strictly to terminal tackle. The other one is, jigs, chatterbait, swim jigs. I have a topwater box, and then I have a cranking box. So, I'll probably take 1 or 2 colors of a deep diver, then like a medium diver, and then, shallow and or square bill, and then probably like 1 or 2 lipless. With my lipless crankbaits, if it's not chrome or gold, I don't want it. It's simple. Gold if it's stained water and sunny, chrome, overcast, clear. That's pretty much all I mess with.
See, whenever I go fishing, which I don't fish that much anymore, but whenever I go fishing, I always get red or black.
Those are good colors. My thing is, and I'll tell you why those are my only 2 colors with a lipless. Just because if you're fishing a lipless crankbait, 99.9% of the time you're trying to imitate a shad, a heron, maybe even a bluegill, but a lot of the times you're imitating a bait fish. And if you notice, just with catching bass, crappie, whatever your fish of choice to catch is, even with catfish, if you go down to like Greenwood or Boys Mill Pond or, something that's like predominantly stained water year round, catch a bass, it's going to have a gold, yellow tint to it. But go to Kiwi or Joe Cassie, something real clear, that thing's going to be white and silver, like bright. It's kind of the same thing with your water clarity with your bait fish. If it really, like say you've had like 2 weeks of rain, right? And it kind of blows out your favorite fishery. Well, in that 2 weeks, that water is staining those fish too. So that's like my I guess, rule of thumb, if you will. Super stain, it's gold. If it's clearing up or really clear, it's chrome. Just because the way I fish a lipless, I'm either burning it or yo-yo. I don't fish a lipless no other way.
Yeah.
And
we were down in Lake Seminole in Florida. We were fishing 2-day tournament, and the second day, we didn't do good the first day. The second day, we were trying to qualify for national championship in Minnesota. We wasn't going anyway because there's no way we could get out of class and go up there. And we fished the first day, didn't do any good. And then the second day, about, 2 o'clock or an hour and a half before weigh-in, started throwing a red lipless crank, reddish orange, and started wearing them out.
Yeah, well,
Didn't run out of time, and top 3 people, that's what they said they were fishing with, was that one color. Nobody else was really catching fish.
Right. Well, see, and what I've noticed about when you get into your reds and stuff, I personally, with my experience, and you can watch any tutorial on YouTube from any angler ever. And it's a rule of thumb. Typically red is around your springtime. That's really about the only time I pick up red. Now, with saying that, I went to the KBF National Championship last year on Lake Gunnersville in Alabama. And red is about the only thing they would mess with. Well, with consideration, I was throwing a Z-Man chatterbait, the jackhammer, in 1/2 ounce, but I was throwing it in a color called Bee Height Delight, which is like a green pumpkin and chartreuse. I found in like the real like thick, heavy grass areas, they wanted that over the red.
Right, and that's where we were catching the ones down in Florida. But I feel like in Florida, everything is colorful down there. Man, I caught a small largemouth on like this bright. I was trying to catch a peacock bass, and I was throwing a lipless, and it was just bright blue and yellow. And man, the largemouth were wearing that thing out. Couldn't catch a peacock on it. Finally did end up catching a peacock, but it was on a jerk bait in the middle of the summer. That was kind of weird, but yeah, go ahead.
Right. Yeah, I mean, well, okay. So as far as colors, though, I've also Lake Lanier, of all places down in Georgia. Me and my buddy Kyle, we were pre-fishing for a KBF event down on Lanier, and I found that that we found quite a few schools of fish on the northern end, right out of the river, and they wouldn't touch anything except for Kyle's actually the one that discovered it, but he had like it was almost like a tan, not really like a yellow or orange. It was almost like a really, really light brown, like a
Kind of like a crawdad color.
yeah, like a natural crawdad color, and it was blown out water, super murky. I was banging that lipless like crazy. Tried, a real fluorescent spinner bait, went solid white, went to a chatterbait. The only thing we could get hit on was that sand tan color square bill or lipless. And luckily he had like 2 or 3 of them in his box, because I sure didn't, have any. I've never bought a tan lure. I mean, that's just not, I've never seen a tan bait fish, so it's not like my go-to. But, I mean, colors will definitely throw you off. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions in bass fishing, or in fishing in general, is the color of a lure. And, I mean, I've talked to so many different people. Brandon Cobb, for instance, he lives down in 96. Bassmaster Elite dude. He's definitely paved his own way. He has a foundation to stand on, I'll say. And, that's what I love about fishing, because it all boils down to preference. Because talking to him, I mean, he's never thrown red ever. And, I mean, has plenty of checks to show you that you don't have to throw red. But I don't know, man. That's just that's one of the things that always like blows my mind, because that's also how I end up throwing a lure or a color that I've never thrown. Is usually going out with a buddy and be like, man, they're not going to hit that blue and chartreuse. This super clear water. 4 hours later, I don't have a fish, and they have 7. You start to listen. So,
what I'm sitting here thinking about. This is random. Can you imagine Bill Dance on a kayak? Like, he can't even get on a boat without falling off. Like, can you imagine him trying to fish on a kayak? Like, I know that's random, but a thought just popped in my head, and I almost started laughing to myself, because I want to see that video.
I used to watch bloopers in my physics class all the time, bust out laughing in the middle of class, Bill Dance bloopers. But yeah, I have one more question. I think we start wrapping it up. So I know what it's like for a Bassmaster, or a bass boat tournament. When you show up, everybody putting their boats in, whatever, and then everybody blasts off. You go around in certain order. So how does that work in kayak fishing? What's the morning look like before a tournament, and kind of how do they lay that out in the mornings?
okay, so kind of going to be like a 2-part answer. Just because you have your local trails and then your national level trails. National level trail usually is a lake-wide tournament, meaning any public access boat ramp. It can be, a free boat ramp, a pay boat ramp, but it has to be a boat ramp. And you use something called Tourney X. Tourney X is like the staple as far as apps go when it comes to kayak fishing and stuff like that. There's Tourney X, and now there's another app called Fishing Chaos. You have to have either one of those apps, depending on what tournament is, sponsored by what app. KBF is now Fishing Chaos, so we'll use that as an example. First thing in the morning, you have, time frames. I know with bass boats, usually you meet at one ramp. You pay your entry fee, do your boat number, draw your boat number, whatever. Everybody sits out at the dock, in their boat. They call by number and everybody takes off, or they just do a drag race, blast off type of deal, and you have a time to come and be back. It's kind of like that, but not really, because with kayak fishing, for instance, we'll say, okay, you can launch at 5:30, lines in at 6. That's typically how they do it. Now, how do they tell that? If it's a lake-wide tournament, every single boat ramp on the lake is open for anybody. Well, you have that app. You have to check in on the app before you can leave that boat ramp. You cannot be sitting in your kayak and check in and you're 100 yards away from the ramp, because you will automatically be disqualified. Because the second you check in, it sends a GPS ping your exact location of where you're at. And there's two different reasons why they do that. And I know this just because of, following KBF and all the captains meetings and stuff like that. Number one, obviously, is to prevent people from cheating. So you're not fishing, off limits water. It's fair to everyone. The second reason is for angler safety. Say you happen to go missing, or you lose cell service, you drop your phone, you don't show up to the check-in, the weigh-in, you never check out. They have a GPS ping of your last known location to where to start looking for you. Because with a kayak, you're only limited, you're not running 10 miles from the ramp. That's, you can, but I doubt you're going to get back, for the tournament. But so you get to your, whenever, this is what I do. I trailer my kayak just because, now I have so much stuff that I put on it. It's just so much easier to trailer it, loading and unloading. And even though I'm a kayak guy, I understand boating etiquette, boat ramp etiquette. I'm not the guy camping out on the boat ramp for 25 minutes in the morning. I rig up, obviously out of the way, put my boat in the water, do a triple check, make sure I have everything, identifier, phone, full charge, snacks, water, whatever. I get on the water, check in on the app, as I'm sitting at the dock, and then I can take off to wherever I want to go. I usually get to my spot early, and this is the part that will kind of hit you in the feels. A lot of the times I'll get to my spot and still have like 16, 17 minutes, left to wait before that 6 o'clock or 6:30 lines in. And I'm an honest guy, could I make a cast 10 minutes before everybody else? Absolutely. But I'm the type of guy, like, it feels better when you win if you know that you did it the right way. You know what I mean? Yeah. So subconsciously, I've never made that cast before lines in. But I've been in plenty of situations where I get to my spot and they are schooling and busting all around me, and you just got to sit there and watch the clock. But yeah, so lines in happens. You start fishing. Usually you have a lines out time, which typically is 2:30 to 3:30, depending on the length of the tournament. And then you have an hour after that lines out time for photo submission. Because a lot of the time, like in Lake Gunnersville,
ain't no service.
There's no service whatsoever where I was catching fish. But I was on them, so I wasn't leaving, And then, so they give you that hour grace period. Now, you also have to check out, once you get back to the ramp, and that lets everybody know he at least made it off of the water. So instead of looking at the lake, if he didn't show up, you need to be calling highway patrol and checking for wrecks and, stuff like that. But usually you'll have, some type of meetup location, whether it be a tackle store, wherever. KBF usually does like Chamber of Commerce buildings, because they get in with the city or whatever for whatever event they're going to. And usually go that route. The same thing with Hobie BOS. They'll do a Chamber of Commerce or, a nearby, nice hotel that has like a big, like banquet room or something like that. And then your photo submissions are judged by 3 different people. So it's a completely unbiased judging system. And once your fish gets accepted, you get a confirmation email, letting you know, hey, your fish has been accepted. You can check on the app to see if it's been accepted. And as far as like the tournament in a whole, it's the same concept. You take your 5 biggest, or submit your 5 biggest, and obviously, the most inches down to the 1/4 inch wins. And it's, like I said, really the biggest thing is not having a live well and having to measure your fish. That's probably the biggest difference as far as, limited space and stuff like that. It's really the same thing. You're going out there looking for 5 keepers. And, once you get your 5 keepers, you're looking for 5 bigger ones.
So what's your goal? I guess, what's your end goal? Are you going to try to go pro or?
I mean, that's, everybody wants to live out that fairy tale. I'm more of a realist though, and so my goal is if I can just keep fishing tournaments, because don't get me wrong, it's nice cashing a check. It's nice having that plaque and everybody, shaking your hand and giving you high fives, telling you, and getting recognition from sponsors and being, all of that's cool. But my thing is there's nothing like being up at 3:00 in the morning and being like a drag race to the boat ramp. And, like, man, it's go to that feeling is really what I chase every single time, from, the weeks before a tournament, checking all my rods, going through all the guides, making sure all my reels are good, switching out line, checking baits, making sure, split rings are good, all the treble hooks are good. I didn't dole out any, terminal tackle, or I'm stacked at, like, all of that. I mean, I guess that's the definition of a passion, if you ask me.
Because I do the same thing with, different types of hunting. I mean, I'll start cleaning my decoys with soap and water for about a month before season comes in. And at the end of the season, they're so freaking muddy, it's not even funny. But no, I get it. That's definitely the passion. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we got today. Thanks, Drew, for coming by and give us a little rundown. We're going to do a couple more episodes with Drew. As you can tell, he's very passionate about what he does, and we can't help but appreciate that. But everyone, don't forget to go check out Project DIY Hunter on Facebook, and if you got any questions, email us at projectdiyhunter@gmail.com, and keep your eyes open for the next episode. Thanks.